Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining our webinar this morning, all the way from with some people from Edinburgh, myself, and then everybody else from Aberdeen. So welcome on board. My name is Jude McCurry. I'm the CEO for SBRC, and the reason why we wanted to do this webinar based around Aberdeen today was because of the very tight, close-knit community, business community that you have in Aberdeen, and we wanted to make sure that everybody was doing okay. I have made some really good friends in Aberdeen over the last few years, not just business contacts. And I think it's really important that we keep all these conversations going between Aberdeen and also the rest of Scotland. And one of the people that I have been very lucky and sometimes unlucky to work with is Mr. Graham Gordon, who is probably one of the most networked people in Aberdeen, and also who is really, really good at keeping these conversations going outside of Aberdeen, and will always work with Scotland IS and on the board with One Digital and stuff as well. So I'm going to hand it over today, and he's going to do the hosting today, so I'll get a break. And yeah, if anything goes wrong, it's his fault from here on in. Thank you, Graham.
No pressure whatsoever. So good morning. Thank you, Jude, and good morning, everybody. Welcome to, I think, the 9th webinar that SBRC has created in Scotland, particularly around the Scottish Business Cares initiative, which is a goodwill collective formed in response to COVID-19 by SBRC and its partners. It's delivered by SBRC in partnership with Scottish Government, also Par Equity, my favourite word, Taranata. I keep wanting to say Taranata Boomday as the company name, but I won't say that because Paul's not on the call. Dorman Solutions and Clark Communications. The focus of SBC really is around advice, sharing experiences, and bringing the business community and other organisations together in these most surreal of times. We're talking about speed and agility and flexibility, but we're talking about survival, revival, and prosper. The key elements that we're trying to bring together in these webinars are the fundamental basics of good business and good community, which are people and cash, and how you treat those two. And I think part of today will be us speaking about how people and brands want to be remembered post this event. And we've got a good representation of the business community and organisation community, certainly in Aberdeen. Aberdeen faces a particular challenge in terms of universally, everybody's in COVID and suffering from lockdown. We all know that. But right now, Aberdeen is suffering from an extremely low demand and low oil price. So we've taken a double hit. It's a perfect storm just now. And really what we wanted to share today was the experience of the panel that we have here on what we can do, what we are doing, what we should be doing moving forward, and what we want to be remembered for through this process. And that's not just an Aberdeen problem, but we wanted to do, and we're very grateful that SBRC have done this, but we wanted to do one with an Aberdeen flavour, because sometimes we exclude ourselves, and sometimes we are excluded because of our geography and our main industry. It doesn't overlap. We don't overlap on a continuous, ongoing basis with the rest of the country, and I mean that is Scotland and the UK. If you want to internationalise, come to Aberdeen. We know how to do that pretty well. So we've got a panel of speakers and then a slightly changed lineup to the advertised show. Bob Drummond won't be joining us today, for unfortunately. He's safe and well, but he won't be joining us today. Our panel and our lineup, and we're going to start with Amanda McCulloch, who's the MD Aberdeen-based Thorpe McCoy McCulloch Recruitment. She joined in 1999, I believe, when she was 16, and she's developed, battled, fought, kicked, and scrummed her way through to the MD role, which she currently holds, and the shareholder role, along with Judith and Karen. She's been a very strong supporter as an incomer. I mean, she's been here this long that she's almost saying I can fit, and enjoys a buttery. So that makes her local. And she's been a strong supporter of the Aberdeen community, business and otherwise, and is currently a board member of Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce, it's said on the internet. Professor Elizabeth Gammy, you are a professor, Elizabeth, aren't you? Yeah, good. Just nod just now. Good, okay. I wouldn't want to misquote you. And she's a well-published professor as well, so I'm glad I got that bit right. Her publications extend to at least 2 screens on my laptop when I was researching her, which is an amazing thing to be published to that level. She's currently the head of Aberdeen Business School at Robert Gordon University, and she has a deep interest in all things business, and particular finance and accountancy. So we've got to get the timing right today, otherwise Elizabeth will be all over me. So we'll be working that one out. She's a board member of various businesses, relevant organisations, and is also a trustee of the Riding for the Disabled Association in Aberdeen. Cameron Gordon is the business development executive at the Data Lab in Aberdeen. So he runs the office up here. It's an office of one, but it's well supported by many others. We do let people come from other parts of the country in to help him out. He is an aeromechanical engineering graduate from Strathclyde University. I don't know why I'm reading this. From Strathclyde University, he graduated in 2018, where one of his highlights was he took a course and played a part in the Shell Eco Marathon in London, where his team's design for a vehicle was built and used to compete in the final race. So his need for speed, data, and detail continues, I'm sure, as he will tell you about as we move forward. Ross McKenzie is a data privacy and tech lawyer, and he'll tell you his life is nothing like Suits, which really disappoints me because I really wanted his life to be like Suits, even though he's doing a Justin Timberlake lookalike today, but let's not mention that. He works for Addisell Shaw Goddard, where he works with a range of FTSE 100 and 250 companies. He's a qualified data protection practitioner, and he holds a master in IT and telecommunications law with distinction. Go Ross, distinction. And is focused on data privacy and GDPR, which, if you remember GDPR, everybody was talking about it last year and the year before. It slipped off the radar just a little bit, but is really relevant, and Ross will tell you more about that. He's previously a sports production assistant, so he's more used to being on the other side of the camera than this side, but actually, let's face it, if you know him, he much prefers to be on this side of the camera. And then we'll round up with Hugh Little. He's going to close for us today. Hugh has now a portfolio career in the nicest possible way. He is here, there, and everywhere in terms of investment advice and support. He's the chair, the governor, the non-exec in various companies, both in terms of his investment, in terms of finance and expertise. Back in the day, Hugh was head of M&A Aberdeen Asset Management, where he was the 9th employee, I think, still 9th. I'm sure he's got one of those original pay slips that says employee number 9. And also in 2019, he was recognised by the IOD as a non-executive director of the year in Scotland, which is, was it just Scotland or was it UK, Hugh? Scotland's good enough, was it? Yeah, okay, good enough. We'll go with Scotland, fantastic. He's also, previously he's invested and was a board member at Aberdeen Football Club, but that is a whole webinar in itself that Hugh will tell you a fascinating story if you buy him a whiskey or two. So, thank you all for joining us this morning. We have a great panel with some great stories, and we'd like to start off with Amanda McCulloch from Thorpe Malloy McCulloch.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you for the very kind intro to, especially the part about starting at the age of 16. I owe you a beer, that's all I'll say. So morning to everyone. I'm delighted to be able to speak at this Aberdeen SBRC seminar. We are a people-based business, as Graham rightly said. We're an SME. We support recruitment and associated needs across various businesses. So across the northeast of Scotland. So it's different scales, different sizes, different sectors. So what I'm hoping to do today is give you a bit of an overview of our story, our take-homes as a people business, and our observations, not only as an SME ourselves, but also what we're seeing across the northeast of Scotland and our client base. So I'll kick off hopefully with some slides. I hope the tech works, so bear with me just a moment.
Let's put it on to slideshow, Amanda.
I will do. It's not working for some reason. I don't know why. So I will try again. Bear with me. Ah, there we go. Can everybody see? I'm hoping so now. Can everybody see? Or not?
Slideshow.
Yeah, it's for some reason it's not working. Apologies, I'm just gonna go without the slideshow, if that's okay, everyone. Sorry, there's me saying it's all about tech. So the irony is not lost on me. I think on my first slide, I talked about what to expect, and I think what we've just learnt and what's just evidenced recently is to learn about what is expected and what isn't expected. So I just hope that there's no other interruptions to today's proceedings. So today I'm keen to not only share our story, but also some of the challenges that we faced around people and leadership, and the importance of connectivity and community as well. So what struck me within the Northeast over the past few weeks has been our responsiveness and our speed of responsiveness. And I believe that has emerged very much from the experiences that we've had basically over the past few years, where we've emerged from a downturn. So we've been hit, as Graham rightly says, not just by COVID, but also by minus USD crude prices. We've had Brent reaching an all-time low. So in many ways, as Graham alluded to, it's almost been the perfect storm for Aberdeen. But certainly for us, recent history, I think, has told us that we need to act really quickly. And I've been absolutely amazed at how quickly businesses have responded. And they've shown a real agility that I don't think we've seen before, both in terms of our experience as a business and what I'm seeing across our client base. And what I've witnessed is the ability for companies to mobilize teams really quickly for remote working. There's been a setup for new techs and new means of communication. So whether it's WhatsApp, Zoom, Teams, all of these comms are now very much in place and embedded into organizations now. We've looked at the dreaded F word, furlough, and we've looked at the scheme and how that works. And we've really rapidly gone through consultation processes quickly. And also importantly, I think empathetically as well. I think that's been really critical. We recognise the need for both social and work connectivity too, which I think has been absolutely vital. And companies have, I think, taken the opportunity to become much more people focused, and they really are supporting their workforce. And as a people-based business, that's been really fantastic to see that has been put in place, because I think it's really critical at this time. So suddenly we're seeing that company culture is very much front and center. That's what businesses are really focused on at the moment. And as a people business, that really resonates with me. Companies are using tech obviously a lot more for the likes of interviewing. We've seen within our own business in terms of onboarding, virtual inductions, training, etc. All of those things have been used to great effect and good effect over the past few weeks. And I think I'm not alone in saying that some of this stuff we've certainly talked about. I know we have as a business. We've talked about it for months, if not years, and we've never actually managed to make it happen. So I think now what we're seeing in a matter of weeks is businesses actually rising to that challenge and bringing in new tech, new ways of working, new engagement with their workforce that we've never actually seen before. So I guess my hope in what is and continues to be a really unsettling time is that there will be learnings from this. So I think we have to accept that people's perceptions are forever changed. I think home working and office working is more flexible. I think it has to be. I think we've taken away the mistrust about flexible working and working from home. I think there was always that sense of what's that person doing when they're actually at home. I don't think we think about things like that anymore, and quickly that's changed. I think we've broken the barriers around technology. And I think even in terms of office working, I've certainly seen, and a lot of commentary coming through, that basically it's more appreciated. So actually, you know, people are actually saying, I like going into work. You know, I'm never going to complain about going in on a Friday afternoon and working late ever again. People are changing their perceptions. And I think that's going to be really important moving forwards. Similarly, things like space planning, you know, at some point when the lockdown eases, we're going to have to manage how people reintegrate back into the office. And is that going to be the same as it was before? And should it be? or should we be looking at sort of managing that differently? So I think those are some key questions. We'll definitely embrace face-to-face interactions. I certainly miss, you know, it's great to see people virtually, but I'm missing face-to-face interaction, and I think other people are too. And we'll also accept, as evidenced by today, that technology isn't always perfect, it doesn't always work. And that's okay too, because we're living in an imperfect world at the moment. So that you know, that's fine, and we're okay with it. I promised that, and I actually said to the rest of the panel, that I wouldn't speak about the F word. So the dreaded word that none of us ever knew about pre-COVID, the word furlough. But I wanted to raise it just because it is something that has again made us think. So what has it made us think? It's made us think about how we communicate front and center, and I think that's important. So how do we communicate as a team? How do you motivate a workforce when you've got half of it on furlough, half of it retained? You're motivating and engaging in different ways. So again, that might be through the different technology means, but also it's again that appreciation of your co-workers and the relationships that you'll go on and build. And how do we integrate a team member once the furlough period ends? How do we manage holidays? As an agency, it's been incredibly challenging for us because we're actually managing the furlough process for agency workers. So we're responsible for that. So within the recruitment sector in the Northeast, and also the impact that has on the client base, that's been a massive challenge because there's been very little guidelines out there. There's a lot of stuff about furlough, but there's not much stuff about agency workers in furlough. So work and home life, I guess, have become intertwined. I believe the teams we now have in this time of crisis and the teams that we build, I think those teams will probably be the best, the strongest, the most agile that we've ever witnessed. And I think that's a really positive take home for us to consider at this time. Another thing that struck me in terms of challenges is actually a key concept that I learned probably about a year ago, sort of before any of this was happening. And it was a concept that was shared with me about key sort of success in business and life. And it's called the Stockdale paradox. I don't know whether anyone's heard of it or not, but it really resonated with me because it seems so appropriate to the times that we're living in now. So the concept came from an individual called Jim Collins. He wrote an amazing book called Good to Great. And Jim was a prisoner of war in Vietnam. He spent 8 years in a concentration camp. But the key thing about it was that he never actually lost faith. In fact, through his experience, he was a realist. He recognized the situation he was in, but he never lost faith regardless of the position that he was in. And there comes the paradox, because he had faith in something that was unknown, whereas other prisoners who went in with kind of blind optimism, they didn't necessarily make it out. So those were the individuals that thought, I'm going to be out by Christmas, I'm going to be out by Easter. So all of these different things were going through their head, and they were repeatedly disappointed. So to me, it resonated because I think we're in a position at the moment that businesses do need to confront the realities that we now face here in the Northeast. But we need to balance the light with the dark. We need to balance the faith with the realism. And I think that's something that, in terms of leadership within Aberdeen, I think that's going to be so critical. We've seen a lot of world leaders get that balance right, and those are some of the world leaders that I think have had a real impact. But leadership is so important right now. I think it's a chance to reinvent leadership. I think it's a chance to set new standards. But I do think the Northeast, more than ever, needs to have good leadership, and we need to look at the government, we need to look at businesses for that. I think it's absolutely pivotal that we get that right. So I'm hoping that some of that resonates with you as much as it did with me. Coming back to our story in terms of the concept of community, I'm an advocate of staying connected. I think that's absolutely pivotal. You need to reach out to people in times like this. You need to look at that as part of your strategy. You need to look at best connectors, who can link you to new networks. Speak to your competition. I've had more conversations with other recruiters in the past 4 weeks than I have done ever in 20 plus years in recruitment. And that's because we have kind of pushed down the barriers and said, actually, this is a time that we can actually collaborate and learn from each other and follow best practice. Nothing's perfect from a personal perspective. I'm a perfectionist, but I realise that nothing is perfect. And if I'm 80% there, then you know, that's a good thing. The only way is forward as well is something else that I've focused on. Everyone seems to be talking about bounce back at the moment. And I listened to a really interesting lady the other day who talked about, why are we looking at bounce back? Let's look at bounce forward. And I thought, how cool is that? Bounce forward, because we can't go back the way, we can't change what's happened. We have to understand that we're going to lose and we're going to gain throughout this period. So for me, the concept of actually looking to move forwards and looking to future plan is absolutely pivotal in these times. So in terms of future planning, a few observations that I've got. We saw it in the oil and gas downturn, and I think we'll see it again. There were opportunities that presented on the back of the downturn. I saw entrepreneurialism like I've never seen before. I saw people take risks that they would never have done before. I saw people seize opportunities, and it's not to say it wasn't difficult, because it really was for everyone, but you know, there is potential there, I think, for moving forwards in terms of this new world. There will be potential new roles in tech. There'll be potential new roles in roles we don't even know about, supporting mental health and well-being. I think there'll be the potential for roles to be combined, a greater range of skills to be developed. I think when we bounce forward, if we use that term, we'll look at skills that we do. What skills will we need, and how will we respond? How will we ramp that up? Could it kickstart the gig economy? We've talked about the gig economy for a long time. So is that something that we could do? And in our industry, you know, certainly within recruitment, we're going to have to look at not just filling jobs, but also full-on recruitment strategies. So in summary, really from my perspective, it's future planning is going to be critical. We might all feel a bit like startup businesses after all this, but again, that's okay. And I think really for me, as a part business owner and somebody that's seeing other business in the community, I think we have to choose how we respond. We can't control what's happening, but we can choose how we respond. We can create our own story, and we can have a shared purpose, and we can support each other in the community. And that's really my take homes, my experiences, my learnings, and I hope some of them have resonated. And thanks so much for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Amanda. I mean, I think the touching on technology and culture and the whole Jim Collins BHAG, big hairy audacious goals, all these things that many businesses are aware of, but right now we're going through that survive and revive and prosper mindset. And technology is going to look after itself. You know, as IFB, we've moved people from their own office space into many home working locations, and we've done that for some of the biggest companies up here. But so the technology works really well. I think the challenge for technology and SMEs is maybe, as Amanda has said there, that a lot of SMEs weren't prepared for this, and putting the workload remotely, flexible, distributed workforce. But there are solutions there, and you know that's been a focus for us. But that bounce forward part, how do we onboard all these people back into the workplace? And the thing that's going to be clear is that IT and definitely business will not manage everybody turning up at 8:30 on Monday morning for business as usual. So think about your planning within your businesses and how you manage people and integrate them back in. So thank you very much, Amanda. I'd like to hand over to Professor Elizabeth Gammy now. Elizabeth.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me to take part in this. I thought I would start off actually by talking a little bit about what the Aberdeen Business School and the university has done in response to this COVID crisis, and what we're then doing in terms of moving forward. Luckily, as a university, we have extensive use of distance learning, and we were therefore able to transform from a face-to-face learning environment to a virtual learning environment relatively seamlessly, or certainly seamlessly from the point of view of students, staff were putting in huge amounts of work to convert their materials into distance learning. We have now finished our semester 2 teaching, and we're about now to embark on our distance learning assessment. Courseworks are fine. They've always been, or certainly in recent years, have been uploaded online, marked online. The challenge for us has been to convert into online examinations. We have 150 online examinations about to take place, which is quite a challenge for the university in terms of the IT support. As a university, we were not keen to abandon assessments as other universities have done. They've simply abandoned first and second year assessments. We were keen not to do that, partly because of the backwash of effect of assessments, that students are very governed to preparing for exams, preparing for their assessments, and if you take that opportunity away from them, they kind of lose a bit of direction, and then potentially then don't have the right underpinning moving forward. In terms of planning for semester 1, you know, there's so many unknowns at the moment. It's really difficult trying to work out what things are going to be looking like come September. But we've already taken the decision to push back the start of semester 1 by 2 weeks. So it'll be taking place later on in September. We're going to have a virtual induction rather than all the students coming to the university, even if they can actually potentially do that. We're looking at different mechanisms of delivering certainly the start of semester 1. We're thinking at this stage it's going to be really unlikely that we're going to be back as normal. So we're looking at whether we could do some blended learning with some social distancing, so that we'd have no big lectures taking place in lecture theatres. That would still be delivered remotely, but have workshops and tutorials, but with fewer numbers of students, and obviously adhering to social distancing. We're also looking at actually starting off on a fully distance learning basis, and then converting at whatever time during the semester that we can. We will definitely be starting in some sort of delivery in September. However, for international students who interestingly, there are some countries at the moment that don't really recognise distance learning, and whether that's going to change is going to be quite interesting, whether this situation is going to force these international students and the countries that they come from to actually recognise that it is a valid and very effective way to deliver material. But we're also then, a lot of our distance learning, or a lot of our postgrad courses have January starts. So if students have applied to come to us in September, do not want to start in a different alternative format, they will have the opportunity to delay their course and actually start in January. And we are hoping come January that things will be a little bit more back to normal. But I think as a school and as a university, we feel we're really well equipped to deal with whatever, however the situation develops. And we are there to support students in all sorts of different environments. Interestingly, we've just done a big survey with the students to try and get some feedback around how we have transitioned into this new environment. And the student feedback has been incredibly positive. And I think that's a huge testament actually to the amazing amount of work that the staff in the university, both academic staff and technical professional staff, have actually really gone above and beyond the call to actually provide an excellent service to the students. Looking forward, one of the key features of the business school in particular is placements. A lot of our students go out on a 12-month placement as part of their degree. It's fantastic for the students to get this work experience. It's also a great opportunity for employers to have a student for a 12-month. It's a bit like a 12-month long interview process, and lots of our students then will return back to their placement employer on graduation. Already we're seeing that some placement employers are saying, actually, no, we're not wanting, or we're not going to be able to take placement students starting. So we're looking at doing short placements. So there will still be the opportunity for students to do their 12-month placements as normal, but we're now also looking at 6-month placements. So that has literally just been agreed by our academic assurance processes in the university, that we can offer 6-month placements. We also developed a connect to business route in the downturn in the oil company, where there was a retraction of quite a few placements, and we developed this route, which was mainly targeted at third sector and SME sector, whereby students work for 2 days a week, but for free. And they would undertake usually a project type based in an organisation for around 12 weeks. And again, that was incredibly popular when we had the oil downturn. And again, we see that this route is actually, I think, probably be quite popular moving forward. So in some ways, it's a free resource for lots of organisations, but the students really benefit from actually going into an organisation and being able to get some work experience and hopefully work on some sort of business consultancy type project. One of the other things that we have been doing is looking at potential upskilling. So we have recently been advertising some free courses. We've been looking at strategic leadership, resilience and change management, which are 2 key things that I think are going to be very relevant moving forward. And there's also strategic digital marketing. The uptake in these courses has been phenomenal. We have been stowed out by applications for these courses, and the courses have now actually been closed because we cannot take any more numbers at the moment. We are in discussion with various organisations to see if we can get some more funding to offer these courses again. We're also looking at providing some shorter courses. So these are 15 credit bearing short courses, but actually looking at delivering some nano credential and micro credential training. And we're currently looking to see how we can provide for that. I mean, I think there are tough times ahead. I think it's going to be really important for people to continue to use this time wisely, particularly people, for example, who might be furloughed, is actually use this time wisely, see what training there is out there that you can actually do. So I appreciate that I've overrun my time, so I'm going to stop there and allow things to move forward, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and it's a good point to finish with. If you've got any questions for the panelists, there is a Q&A app or segment of Zoom that you can stick your questions in through there, or you can use the chat window through Zoom as well, and we'll facilitate the questions as we go through. Don't take this the wrong way. Education is not really viewed by business as being agile and quick moving, but by the signs of things, you've got a great structure there that has been able to spin up really quickly and adapt really quickly, and that's really interesting. I'm sure that we can take some learnings from that externally to RGU, and look forward to speaking to you more about that as we move through the process. Next up is Cameron Gordon, who's the Business Executive Lead for the Data Lab here in Aberdeen. Cameron.
Thanks. I'll get through the various levels of mute that I was on. And thanks to everyone that's come along to this today. It's really exciting to see the number of people that are here. So the Data Lab, for those of you that aren't aware of what we do, we're one of the innovation centres that was set up by the Scottish Government about 5 years ago now. So our remit is data and AI and promoting Scotland as a destination, for these things. We do that through 3 pillars or key areas of working, which is how I'm kind of going to talk today. So the first one is skills and talent, which you've heard both Amanda and Elizabeth speak about. We support 155 MSc students in Scotland, but also we run a number of online courses, short courses, through Future Learn and various other facilitators based on the data and AI scene. What I think is really interesting and what we've seen is obviously a number of drop-off in the placements that the MSc students are getting, but the way the placements have changed. So the smaller companies perhaps aren't as able to take people on, but we've seen a number of the larger international companies in Aberdeen, oil and gas majors, take on more students as they're realizing the resource they can give. And it's all about knowing as much as possible in a time where so much is unknown. So it's using these students to complete the digital transformation. I think everyone's been surprised how easy in the last 2-3 weeks, I say that relatively, getting online has been working from home. It's less easy getting all the data together and making use of it. So the student projects have had a real focus on that, which is really, really positive to see. But this new talent, as Elizabeth said, is getting the opportunity to work in industry, which is really, really great. We've also run our Driving Value from Data course for the second time, and the first one had over 1,000 subscribers with, I think, a 70% completion rate, and the most recent one is promising to be exactly the same, which is really positive. People are using the time they perhaps now have more of at home to reskill or upskill into what will be more central to most businesses coming back after this period. So we're really delighted to be able to help in that. So that's the people side of things. Just quickly, furloughs we mentioned, try not to, but there's been some really great initiatives come out of that. I know that's a difficult thing, that's something that is usually quite hard for people. There's been some really good stuff in terms of enabling what otherwise wouldn't be. So just recently, there was Scottish Tech Army is using furloughed technical expertise to apply to COVID-related projects. So even though there is this downtime, perhaps in the economy and industry specifically, people are still being able to use their skills and their expertise to the advantage of everyone. Cash, that's another really big one. So our that's not our pillar, believe it or not. Our pillar is support to innovate, and we do that through a number of funding opportunities. We have funding ourselves, and it's been really great to see the projects we're already engaged in continue, as they're seen now to be more business critical than ever, to get the value from investment that people have made into these, and continue working with universities and using their lead in being able to go online so well. A number of the projects with RGU have shown that that's helped the businesses they've been working with to understand that. But also through our external funding support. So we are currently engaged with over 35 businesses and consortiums to apply for Innovate UK funding and similar pots to support everyone through the COVID crisis that we're seeing at the minute. And that's all through the data and technical aspects. So easier communication is obviously the big one, but also making things more accessible. So we spoke about placements, using the data properly. It's visualizing that afterwards. So a lot of projects at the minute allowing companies and organizations to get the most out of what they're doing. And then our third one is community and events. So events you can almost swipe off the board, or so we thought a few weeks ago. Things like this have, and the webinars that SBRC have been putting on, Digit Energy has been mentioned already, that's happening today. Really great examples of what's possible. And again, I'm not sure anyone would have considered a virtual conference a few months ago, but now it's being shown that it can be done at a scale over 500 attendees and being run for a full day. So it's really exciting. The community, I'm going to kind of shoehorn into culture as well, keep the community together. Again, events like this are doing really well, but I think something that needs to be spoken about is the positives that come out the back of this, and that I wrote it down. Bounce forward. There we are. I found it. I think that's really key. How can we retain the really good bits of the cultural change that has happened? So the speed of adoption has been incredible, and naturally, in a less unfortunate time, that is really great for innovation. There's a real support there. If people are more willing to adopt new ideas and try things out, are less risk adverse. Again, right now, there's a forced element that you have to adopt these things. But if a bit of that can be retained, we see a real opportunity, especially in Aberdeen, of opening up to more startups and more innovation coming through into the big companies. So our hope is to try and retain as much of that as possible. And being surprised how easy some of the digitization has been. It's been digital transformations, a almost decades-long conversation now, but I think in the last month, more has been done than there has, at least in the last 5 years. So it's being able to quantify that at the end and making sure everyone's getting the value. And the size of the opportunity that creates. How many people coming out of university or in business at the minute or are furloughed are working on their own ideas because they can't work for their company, obviously, but are working on the solutions they see, and how ready will people be to accept them at the end. So supporting this as much as possible, again, through the funding, but through the networking, through bringing people together in conversations like this, to retain the really good cultural changes that have come out of the COVID crisis so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cameron. I think that there's a couple of takeaways from that part before we move on to Ross. Choice has been taken away from us, you know, and as a society, certainly in the UK, we love choice. You know, it still beats me why we queue so much, but we love choice. So when that's all been taken away from us, it's how we maintain the good bits. You know, that we pick and select and choose the really good aspects of technology, culture, people, business practices that have helped us in the matter of weeks. You know, businesses have changed. Good businesses will always be good businesses. The great businesses will be the ones that take advantage of these changes and adapt them into normal business practice. And that, you know, that doesn't matter if you're academic, a charity, a private business, or an investor. It's how we retain the good bits. It's a really good point there. And a huge amount of that relates around culture. One of the risks is we've done all this really, really quickly. You know, we are day 31, day 32. Which year is it? I'm not sure, but we're 31 days into lockdown. This has been forced upon us. For many organisations, it's just had to happen. But maybe Ross, you can touch now on what those risks are, what the opportunities are for those risks long term, and what we could be doing differently. Ross, over to you.
Great, thanks, Graham. You're right. Today we've heard a lot about the opportunities that largely our people can bring to the table when they are working from home and coming up with new ways of working. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the three key areas that we're seeing at Adelshaw Goddard that we're advising clients on, and that's commercial contract issues, data protection issues, as Graham mentioned. I'm a data protection lawyer, so I was going to shoehorn that in some way, and innovation and culture and what comes from that. So the first area is commercial contracts. And we talk about this phrase furloughing, but there's another F word that's being used a lot, and that's force majeure, a concept that we often only looked at university. I've had to blow the dust off some of my university textbooks to remind me about what it all means. And force majeures became pretty relevant in discussions around the supply of services, whether you're relying on a service provider or if you are the service provider. And force majeure has become relevant because contracts give you an allowance, an excuse if an act of God arises, a force majeure event. So we've been scrutinising quite a lot of commercial contracts to see whether those provisions can be relied upon. And the most relevant point to flag is that actually these provisions are construed pretty narrowly. The courts are reluctant for force majeure provisions to be relied on, and to rely on it, you have to be able to demonstrate that the act of God has caused you the issue that's prevented you from performance. And of course, coronavirus, it's quite difficult in some contexts whether to actually identify if that is the reason that you've been prevented from supplying the service. Increased prices, for example, isn't really the reason, isn't enough to be able to rely on a force majeure event to be excused from performance. So, and then some contracts actually define expressly what a force majeure event is. And a good example of that is the Logic oil and gas contracts, supply services agreements, which don't actually provide for pandemics as a force majeure event. So we talked about the opportunities, but clearly if you're going to be providing any services, you need to make sure your service agreements reflect what you're going to provide. And moving forward, it's a good idea to take a look at what your agreements already say. Remember that you can't rely on a force majeure clause moving forward because you know that the coronavirus pandemic exists. This is all about things that weren't expected. So you'll need to carefully consider, is there anything that you're going to be providing to your clients that needs to be factored in, which may be impeded by what's happening? Now, a good example of this will be lockdown events, so you may need to factor in specific wording for that. The other area I want to talk about was data protection, and we've spoken a lot about working from home, and it does provide us with great opportunities, and people are working very hard at home. But what we're finding in the last few weeks in particular is fatigue setting in. And there's been a lot of energy to get into the working from home world, to adjust. And now we're into this kind of business as usual space. Fatigue is setting in, and we're finding that clients are having more and more data breaches because maybe emails being sent to the wrong recipients. You know, human error is the core of many data breaches, and there's been an increase there. Now, you have to remember that personal data breaches that happen on your work estate, whether that's your laptop at home or in the office, is still potentially a matter that the regulator of data protection law, the Information Commissioner's Office, wants to hear about. And businesses have that 72-hour reporting requirement that the GDPR brought into place. So conscious of time, but I just wanted to suggest that you have a look at your data protection policies and procedures, and see if can they work from home, and whether you are able to identify issues that crop up in working from home, and whether the channels of communication are sufficiently open enough to the management if a mistake does happen, because it could cause reputational issues moving forward. The ICO in the UK has recognised that businesses may not be able to meet the regulatory requirement to self-report breaches. They are aware of that the crisis that we're all facing is going to be challenging to meet the timelines, but still it doesn't mean that if a data breach has happened that gives you an allowance, and that you still need to mop it up and deal with it. So that's dealing with when data leaves the business, but data and information can leave your business through people who want to walk away with their data, and that comes down to that's relevant to innovation, and this working from home culture that we've created. The lines between work and home life are becoming a little bit blurred, and many people will be using this time to come up with the new opportunity for their organization, that new innovative step that will enable our businesses to handle this brave new world. And I'm proud in Aberdeen that we live in a very innovative city, particularly in the offshore and energy sectors. So have a think about what sort of culture you're putting forward. And Amanda's mentioned a lot about this at the beginning, but consider making sure that you're innovators in your business are given the headspace to come up with that next idea that will bring your business forward into the next few months and the years ahead. But most importantly, make sure that you're finding ways to capture that innovation in your business. Remember that you are employees, or anything they do that's connected to their duties is owned by the employer. But clearly, what their duties may have been before and what they may be now may have been different. So encourage information disclosure. So encourage your colleagues to be sharing what they're doing and recording what they're doing wherever feasible, to make sure that your organization can lay claim to that innovation. Because if it's the last thing you want to do is get into a bun fight over who owns that innovation. So hopefully that gives you some pointers for things to look ahead. Look at your data protection policy, look at your innovation policies and procedures and how they work in practice.
Thank you very much, Ross. I mean, I think a few key pointers there that we've moved into this at speed. Security, you know, I think it's the stat that we've seen recently as a provider that 80% of the email that was coming through as phishing email that was about your HMRC account, your Argos account, your bank account that was phishing to capture details has been flipped into COVID-related messaging. And if you consider there is 100 million emails, phishing emails that are kicking around minimum a day globally, that's a massive flip. So people are vulnerable, and working your part with your team to make sure that they're educated, you're still protecting the business while they're working remotely and dispersed. Remaining productive, because if you have a security breach, productivity tends to go out the window, and that's always a challenge. And I suppose at a time that people were predicting AI was probably going to compromise the legal profession more than most others, I think off the back of COVID that Ross is probably in a job for a little bit longer, which is you'll be glad to hear, and we'll keep him in David Bowie CDs on his wall. So to round off, we're going to run past 11 o'clock. So we hope you can all stay with us. We've got a couple of questions to take as well. And to round things off today, I'd like to hand over to Hugh Little. Hugh.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks very much. And also to Jude for inviting me to take part in this webinar. As I look outside, it's a glorious day here in Aberdeen, and I'd be lying if I didn't say I would rather be on a golf course somewhere, but genuinely pleased to be here, and hopefully I'll get back on a golf course sometime soon. I'm now accustomed to working via Zoom or Teams. I'm afraid my capabilities do not stretch to providing you with slides, so I apologise for that. I hope that my words and thoughts will do. We are now 6 weeks into lockdown, and leaders of government, leaders of businesses, charities, and all other organisations are, over an extremely short space of time, having to come to terms with a crisis the likes of which none of us has ever encountered before. And for any of those types of organisation, an abrupt loss of revenue streams is scary enough. But when you add into that the complete unknown of when, or even in some cases, if those revenue streams are going to come back, then the overall problem must have been overwhelming for many at the outset. From what I've witnessed since, though, a sense of calmness very quickly took over, amid the realization that whilst we may not know what the future holds, today we have to get our businesses into the best position, firstly to survive, and then hopefully to come through to the other side in the best possible shape, given the circumstances. I could argue, I think, that those things that we're doing now to protect our businesses are things we should have been doing anyway. And I'll argue that they'll need to be part of our ongoing business plans when we get through to the other side. I'll also take a look at how I think other business behaviours will change for the better going forward. So, and these things are now, I think, very well known, but the things we should have been doing as a matter of priority are: 1, looking after our staff; 2, optimizing our cash and liquidity; and 3, making good quality communicating a priority throughout our organisation. Now, as I say, I think I could argue that we should be doing all these things anyway as good practice. But what the crisis has done is bring these matters squarely onto the middle of our radar screens. And frankly, if any organisation hasn't prioritised these things by now, then they'll already likely be facing certain consequences. So let's start with your people. Your workforce is your biggest asset, bar none, and it's vital that you take care of them all the time, but especially during this lockdown. Make sure that every single one of them is being communicated with regularly, not just by message, not just by email, not just for an update on the company, but personally, about their own state of health and well-being and how they are getting through this experience. This applies especially to those on furlough who will be feeling that they are missing out and may be unsure about their futures. Have team calls that are purely sociable over a coffee or a glass of wine to chat about how everyone is managing, sharing funny stories, generally just bonding as you would do if you were still in the office. Turning to liquidity. Never has the phrase cash is king been more prevalent than in this downturn, and even more so, sadly, in the pending recession. So the keys to managing your cash flow are these. 1, improve your visibility of your funding requirements and liquidity through robust daily cash flows. Daily cash flows. Identify quick wins to release cash. 3, freeze all expenditure other than what is absolutely necessary. 4, explore all funding options, including government support. And 5, and this is really important, communicate with all the people you pay on a very regular basis, suppliers, banks, HMRC, landlords, other creditors, and see what deferrals of cash out you can negotiate. Communications was the third point. Good communications is paramount for any successful business, but in a crisis, it is an absolute priority. You will have noticed that it has already appeared in the first 2 categories of staff and cash management, and the importance of good communication should extend throughout your organisation. In a time of uncertainty, all stakeholders want to be kept informed. They want transparency, and from now on, they will want to hear clarity of thought and how you plan to get both through this now and then recover and prosper on the other side. If you've done all of the above, then I urge you to keep on doing them and don't stop doing them. They're all excellent practice in the world of great management. And arguably, on the other side, they'll be even more important. And so what can we say, what else can we say about the other side? Well, it seems likely that COVID-19 will bring recession and the potential for deep economic scars. The Office for Budget Responsibility is now forecasting a 35% fall in second quarter GDP and a 13% fall for 2020 as a whole, which would be the biggest economic contraction in the UK for over 100 years. And of course, here in Aberdeen, we have the double whammy of the massive fall in the oil price in recent months, which added to the virus will put jobs at risk in the energy sector. That said, the sector has come through many tough times before, and whilst this may well be the most challenging of them all, the spirit of community and support within the region and the sector, together with the huge expertise and entrepreneurial skills that we've built up here, will, as it always has in the past, rally together to find new and innovative solutions to ensure that the sector remains key to our area for generations to come. But in the short term, we cannot pretend that for most business, life on the other side of the lockdown will jump back to where it was a few months ago. It won't. So what should we be doing to prepare? Well, first of all, it's never too early to start planning, so let's start planning. And if we start with technology, I'm by no means the expert here, but it's pretty clear, even to a 63-year-old like me, that most of us are experiencing a crash course in e-commerce, meetings via video streaming, digital payments, remote working. And this will inevitably continue and develop, and all businesses must therefore adapt and plan for that. Hopefully, certain changes we make will have ecological benefits, like less business travel. It's interesting to think that it may have taken a pandemic to finally make governments and leaders start to take more care of our planet. And so I think as part of this planning for life on the other side, every business and organization should deconstruct its products and services to look at exactly what its customers will want in the future and how that customer would like that product or service to be delivered to them. And then it should look to adopt or upgrade the technologies it will need to best achieve that. Of course, there will be many logistical issues to work through when people go back to work, And you need to start planning for that now too. Social distancing isn't suddenly going to be lifted, for example. And whether you're a cafe, an office, a school, or a factory, you're going to have to find ways of making your workplace safe for all. And then let me finish by talking again about your staff. If during this crisis you have shown humility, compassion, and a real team spirit via clear communications, then you may well be rewarded in the form of increased staff loyalty and camaraderie, which will bring long-lasting benefits to your business. And doing what's right with your workforce may well resonate with customers and clients too, which would be a real win-win. But the point is, don't stop treating your people that way ever. Which seems like a good point to stop talking, Graham, and as that's by far the most important thing I could possibly say. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Hugh, and thank you to the panel. And we're going to stay on for a few minutes longer, so I do hope that we can all stay together for a bit. The points that are sitting around the recent circumstances of where the position we're all in are affecting everybody, and I think that humanity that's been brought in, that certainly I've been involved in communications with people that and environments, whether they've been Zoom or just before that, certain dinners and events, that we wouldn't have mixed together in this way because we had no commonality. People have referred to a little bit or a lot like war. You know, when was the last time you queued? I have no living memory of queuing to get into a shop. You know, my grandparents, maybe we've had, and things have been rationed, but the thing that's been rationed the most is that networking part that we're all missing. That shouldn't go away. And I think the last couple of speakers there, certainly from Amanda and Elizabeth and Hugh there, talking about that emotional impact, that human impact cannot be undervalued as we move forward here. I think that as a team, we all know each other on this panel, and you guys participating here, you will be closer to your competitors than you've ever been before, in a much more humane way, in a much more positive way, because we are all in the same problem, and sharing that will help us, more of us, get through this at the other side. And people from different industries are speaking to people from different industries about the same problem for the first time in a long time. So that persistence in keeping this going is really tough. We all know as business people that you get distracted by something that comes onto your desk, but the persistence that we've all been allowed to apply to this problem needs to maintain afterward. So thank you to the panel for all your input here. I think you can see that there is a human aspect to this that we all get, and we hope that we've conveyed that to you. And we've got a few questions in the Q&A session that we'd like to run through, if that's okay. Jude, are we okay just to run through the Q&As, if you're okay with that? Do you want me to pick them up?
Yeah, totally fine.
One of them is a little bit about technology. Is there a Slack channel for the community in Aberdeen? If not, would there be value in setting one up to harness the bounce forward concept in Aberdeen? That works. I think the challenge with picking a technology to do that is that Microsoft are now advertising a business product, Microsoft Teams, at peak time in television. That's the impact that this has had on a business provider. Look at the people. Hugh, you talk yourself down a little bit, but you're using the technology. I think the proliferation now of technology, that bubble has burst. So whatever channel, whatever technology we use to pick up that community is irrelevant. Does the community want it? And I think the community will self-serve. I don't know if you've got an opinion on that, guys, if you've got industry channels or a community channel you're part of. Jude?
Yeah, I think we can be channeled out though at this moment in time, and I think it's a mixture of so Hugh doesn't think that he's that great technically and stuff like that as well, but I think it has to be a mixture of the technical stuff but also the relevant information getting out. So there's no point in having Slack channels or daily things that there's nothing really to go out and talk about. I think these kind of webinars that the information gets out and builds that sense of community is better than having somebody managing a Slack channel just to send in information every day. And you also have the issue of trying to manage that. So whose job is it to manage all the questions and stuff that comes in? It's how do we mobilize that networking that we spoke about earlier on? How do we get out and have the chats? And we can't get out and have the chats, but how do we do that over stuff like this, unless there's somebody else willing to take on that role of managing a Slack channel and stuff like that as well. But it is going to be quite time intensive to do it.
Liz, you raised your Elizabeth, you raised your hand there. Do you want to raise a point, or were you swatting a fly? Ah, okay, that's fine. That's okay. I think that the communication open. Here's, I think I've said it before in one of these environments. I think there are two forms of communication that we're not involved in just now. One is semaphore, and the other one is Morse code. But I think it's calmed down now. I think 5 or 6 weeks in, we're all now choosing the channels that work for us, and I think it has to be relevant. I think that sparking up another one, I think, would be challenging. There's another question around investment sources. Yeah, Hugh, sorry, go on.
Graham, I just want to touch back again on humility and compassion, if you don't mind, and how underrated I think those skills are in business leadership, and how I think they will come to the fore more in after all this. And I wanted to give you an anecdote. I hope you don't mind, but when I talk in public about this, the All Blacks rugby team, which is the most winning franchise in the history of sports, they've won 80% of every game they've ever played in 117 years. They have a thing whereby wherever they play in the world, whether it's at home or away, any country in the world, at the end of the game, 2 of the team are selected at random. It could be the captain, it could be a debutant, whatever. And they have to stay behind and clean the locker rooms and turn the locker rooms back into the condition they found them 4 hours earlier, whilst all the rest of the team are waiting out in the bus. And they do that because they're humble. They think that's what they should be doing, not other people should be doing. It's just that it's a very simple thing, but I just think that when we come out of this, I just have a feeling that in leadership, humility and compassion are going to be much more prevalent.
Amanda, are you seeing that in terms, it's maybe too short term for you, but are you seeing that in terms of the demand that companies are looking for from their leaders? Do you think that's going to have an impact, that the cultural part's going to be right at the top rather than the technical part?
And I think it has to shift. I mean, we saw a shift in the leadership going through the downturn last time. To be honest with you, there was a great deal of movement at that level, because sometimes people had been promoted into roles down to technical capability as opposed to necessarily their ability to lead. And I think there is a massive distinction there. So for me, it's about taking that next step further. And I think there's an opportunity here for us to create, and I think I mentioned it earlier on, probably some of the best leaders we've ever seen. I mean, we've all witnessed it with leaders of the countries. We know the ones that are doing it well. We know the ones that aren't. I don't need to say their names. But they're the ones that are speaking truthfully. They're the ones that say, I don't know. We maybe didn't act quickly enough. We maybe didn't respond as well as we could have done. But they're engaging at a human level. And I think more now than ever, it's got to be about speaking truthfully and honestly and openly. And if you don't do that, you're just never going to engage.
And Elizabeth, if I can maybe ask you in that level as well, that the university are very structured, very, nothing's older than education. Well, there's a couple of professions older than education, but not much is older than education. And it works toward a well set out, defined set of criteria and purpose, a certificate, an award, an accreditation. But you feel that your team at RGU, they must have had a change in leadership or a change in leadership strategy that's allowed you to spin up much more quickly, brought about with this crisis. How's that evolved?
I think probably, I suspect actually the downturn in the oil price before kind of gave us all a bit of a scare, to be honest. And I think that the university leadership really started responding to that, because I think when things are easy, it's easy to get kind of a little bit complacent, actually. And I think that really rattled us up, along with a whole lot of other organisations, actually. And I think that the style of leadership and what you need from a leader in tough times is quite different from and I think that we certainly as an organisation have become far more agile and now have the ability to respond quickly and take decisions. And interestingly, there was a talk earlier on about, I think universities are very risk, or have in the past been very risk averse, and go through multiple processes, quality processes, and whilst yes, that's important, we actually need to be able to move quicker. And I think we have really demonstrated that we can move and change things incredibly quickly, without compromising either on quality or on the student experience.
Okay. I mean, that experience, that expectation, we're all expecting things to be delivered to our doors now because we're not allowed out. So that expectation that is delivered to our laptop or our tablet, I think Hugh made the point that businesses who get that quicker and accommodate that quicker, our customer needs and objectives have changed. So therefore, how do we pivot on that? So that's an interesting point. Maybe just one point to finish off with. It's always a dangerous one in terms of investment. Question online: does the panel see an opportunity for meaningful growth in social impact investment and aligned to a mission-led approach from the Scottish National Investment Bank? So what we're really saying is investment going to change? Is the investment profile going to change because 30% of businesses might not be in existence moving forward from the back end of this year? Do we feel that the investment criteria will change? That social impact, do you think that will change? Hugh, maybe your best version.
Yeah, I think, I think you just have to look at the big investment companies in the world right now and what they're doing. And the focus on ESG is growing by the day. And new ESG funds are being launched all the time. The Scottish National Investment Bank, which has just been formed and which will start trading, I think, next year, has a focus on ESG. And if your business doesn't conform, they won't lend you or invest in your business. So I think this is going to come to the forefront 100%, and it's a good thing. Okay,
good. So if we do around the panel, just one thing that we should take away. It can be the same as someone else has said, and just to round us up, what thing should we all be taking away, participants as well as the panel, from today as an action off the back of this? And I'm going to pick on probably Ross to start with, and it can be the same thing for all of us, or 5 or 6 different things.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've spoken a lot about opportunity, and I think for the key takeaway is giving your team, as I said earlier, the headspace to really think about what that looks like and how are they going to deal with that. I mentioned earlier that we've all been running at almost like a sprint-like pace in the last 4 weeks. I think we're now at a time to perhaps slow down and focus on what the future, short-term and long-term future, will look like for our businesses in Scotland.
Cameron?
I think for me, along the same lines as Ross has just said, the opportunity that in the next couple of weeks, as hopefully things begin to stabilise and people get used to the current situation, it's how we come out the other end, capitalising on what we've learned from it. As I mentioned before, the cultural changes and making the most of that, the willingness of larger organisations to adopt things quickly and pushing that and making sure we retain that. So I think, Jackie's point about continuing the bounce forward, I really like that Amanda said earlier. It's perhaps not something that should be in a Slack channel, but a mentality we should all be carrying out of this conversation. And that's how we propagate that through the community.
It's a good point. So, what we want is these messages that we can carry forward with confidence rather than go, it was just a soundbite. Hugh, can I ask you?
Yeah, 2 things. One, if you're not starting to plan now for what your customers want in the future, you're missing a trick. And 2, please look after your staff, in particular those on furlough. They don't feel like they're on holiday. They're scared and they're concerned. So please keep in touch with them and make them feel that they're still part of your organisation.
Elizabeth?
I think reflecting on the skills that are going to be required for successfully bouncing forward, and reflecting on your own skills base and the skills base of employees in your organisation, and then considering how you're going to go about enhancing these skills.
Yeah. And Amanda?
I probably think well, a lot of what's been said it kind of interconnects with what people have said already on the panel, but I think it is about that choosing how to respond. I think we all have a choice. I think we're in a position where we can't control a lot of things that are happening to us on so many levels, but I also think there are some things we can control, and I think there's some things that we can choose how to respond, and I think it will be how we respond both individually and collectively that will make the difference. So for me, you know, it's about that creation of your own story, but it's also about how we can work together as a community really effectively, because, you know, we talked, I think, a lot about collaboration in the oil and gas downturn, and I'll be honest and say I didn't see much collaboration. I think it was a word that was bandied around, and it kind of became a negative word for me. But I actually think if we really do use it in the true sense of the word, then, you know, we've got a great opportunity here to move forwards and to do something different. And we are going to lose things, and I think we just need to accept that, but we're going to gain things too. And I think that's evidence. People have referenced, you know, world wars and other things that have gone through, but people have had a story to tell. People have been able to move forwards. People have gained things out of adversity, and without sounding cliche, but I do think there is still an opportunity here, and I just hope that we can all work together and embrace it.
Thank you all. If I could maybe just sort of summarise that, we're all talking about people. Not everybody can be innovative. You know, innovation is a really tough thing to do, a really hard thing to do. But how do we allow our teams and ourselves to be creative? Part of that will be innovation. That will make people feel productive and therefore valued. And I think that is just a massive thing that we can, if people feel valued right now, even in the most difficult of times, if we can bring everything that we're talking about today, that will help us and them and the areas that we work in. I'd like to thank the panel. Thank you all for your input and your contribution. Sorry to everybody that we've run over by 20 minutes. My timekeeping is never good, but I'm usually late rather than early. And Jude, would you like to round off for us, or are you quite happy to hang up?
I just want to make a final point around what we do next on these webinars with Aberdeen. We have our weekly ones with SBOC in general around funding, around cash flow, around any of the high level information that comes out and stuff, and we get industry specialists to join on those calls. So happy with any feedback if you want to do this probably on a bi-weekly basis and get a panel together, but we need people to help us to do this. And also my final point is that the people who really stand out and help each other and stick together during this are the people that will be remembered post-COVID. So keep looking after each other, your staff, and also each other as well in business. So thank you very much for today. And thank you very much to the hostess with the mostess, Graham Gordon.
Thank you. Stay safe. Have a great day, everybody. Enjoy the sunshine if you can.
Thank you very much. Have a good one.